And any believer in Yeshua should be constantly speaking out against racism. One of my favorite lines that people tell me these days is, stop getting your news from the mainstream media. You know, that's not a nice thing to say to people. Because the truth is, you don't know where I'm getting my news from. It's also difficult to have a polite, respectful conversation. I'm trying to stay close to the heart of God. And when I look at Yeshua, he was a real revolutionary. And one of the things that he did was that when they were going through Samaria and his disciples went to get some food, and they come back and he is hanging out with a woman, a Samaritan woman. That was a double whammy. And so there was tremendous animosity between the two of them. And for Yeshua just to say, I don't care about all that. I want to win souls. I want to win these people to the kingdom. I am seeking to feel and sense God's heart. And I would ask you to as well, lest you become a slave of the media. I don't want the media to tell me how to think about black people or about Arabs. I don't want the right-wing media or the left-wing media. I want to look up and I want to say, Lord, how do you want me to think about these things? And we're living in a day and age where the rise of nationalist groups, not just in America, even here in Israel, all over the world, are coming to the surface. You don't need to go past Genesis 1 to know what God thinks about the races. Because he says, let us make man, black men, white men, Arab men, Jewish men, and women. Let's make them all in our image. And what was the calling on the Jewish people? To be a light for the nation. Most notably in the person of Yeshua the Messiah and then his Jewish disciples. They took this light all over the world. We are called to be a servant nation just as Yeshua was a servant to us. And in every race, there are bad people. There are bad Arabs. There are bad Jews. There are bad black people. There are bad white people. But they're not bad because of their race. It's, as Martin Luther King says, we don't judge somebody by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Not every Arab in Israel is a racist against the Jews. There's many, certainly in the Palestinian territories, certainly in radical Islam. But by and large, we get along. Now, what is nationalism? Do you love your family? Well, then you should love your country, right? It's fine to love your country. Here's the problem. It's when a nation ceases to care for the less fortunate, both in other nations and immigrants within their own nation. God tells us that we're supposed to care for the immigrant, the foreigner in our own community. You can't force round Scripture into the square peg of your culture. You have to study Scripture in the culture in which it was given to fully understand it. And see, what often happens is people, they want to take Scripture and they want to create, in my home country of America, an American Zionism. What's an American Zionism? American Zionism is believing that America it's almost a form of replacement theology, that America is the greatest nation on the earth. Now, I grew up believing that, and I do believe that America has an incredible calling. It's a difference between being the greatest nation on the earth and having an incredible calling. Germany also thought they were the greatest nation on the earth, and then they killed not only 6 million Jews, but millions from all over Europe who weren't Jewish. You see, when you begin to start thinking that you are better than other nations, inherently better, that's not humility. If you're a deacon, a leader in the body, you're called to serve. So to the extent that America or Israel has a great calling, it's to be a servant. There's patriotism. That's wonderful. I am a patriot. Now, what I don't like is that when we think that the word patriot only applies to a certain type of American. A patriot is anyone who loves America, who's willing to fight for America. I think there is a calling to be the best friend of Israel. It's no coincidence that Great Britain used to be the best friend of Israel, and when they turned against the Jewish people starting in the 1920s, they began to lose territory all over the world. Another reason was world missions. I believe more missionaries go out than any other nation in the world come out of America to the nations. And also supporting missions. America, I believe, gives more of their finances to world mission than any other nation in the world, and by far. Here's where the trap is, and this is where people get confused, is they sense that calling, but then it can lead to a bad type of pride. It can lead to nationalism. It can lead to not having a servant spirit. We have to make sure that we're not getting our biblical stances from the media. Let me tell you something. Democrats, Hollywood, they're not my enemy. I may be their enemy. They're not my enemy. They're my mission field. People are outraged that some of our rights might be infringed on as believers. The gospel was birthed in Rome. Rome was a dictatorship, an empire. And the disciples were under that. In addition to that, they were under the persecution of the rabbis and the Sanhedrin. According to Scripture, the correct response is to rejoice. Instead of getting angry, instead of being shocked, instead of going, this is horrible, worship God and thank Him. What did Jesus tell us in the Beatitudes? When you're persecuted, when people say all kinds of evil about you, rejoice. Because such were the prophets treated who came before you. You're in the company of the prophets when you're persecuted. You want grace to be released? You want revival to be released? It's not in complaining.